Okay. So you're very welcome, Marge. Thank you so much for doing this. We are very excited about this. And yeah, we're really looking forward to hearing how you have sort of put together this Gestalt language development piece that you've put together for this evening.
Well, thank you, Michelle. And I really appreciate the invitation. I'm really honestly very excited to be here. I mean, I like doing webinars. Sometimes I love doing webinars, but I love the fact that you are an all volunteer organization who's just trying to get the word out. And like you said earlier, make sure that parents and others who are with Gestalt language processors are aware of the differences in support, because there are a lot of differences. And as you've learned from Julie, already, some of the things are really foundational, like being able to follow a child's lead and where does that fit in. But for Gestalt language processors, it's actually even more important. It's really imperative. So let us just get started. So the first slide is one that a parent put together to demonstrate what she knew about her child's, one of her favorite gestalts. And it's, wee, this is fun, I'm flying. And you can hear in my own intonation that this is one of those, melodically rich comments that came from another source. And the child says it just exactly the way it was heard. So listen to this.
I'm flying! I'm swimming!
So you have there, could you hear that okay?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay, great. Well, you hear there the intonation, and that's one of the things that is just a hallmark of Gestalt language processors, Gestalts, is the intonation. And so many of the kids who we support are really good musically. So many have perfect pitch. And, we try to sing along and they say, no, thank you. So when media presents something in this perfect way and the musical child realizes it's just perfect, then that child is able to use that incoming information, that new language, in a very self-generated way. So let's talk about language development. I mean, those of you whose child has been on a wait list and you think, I just need a primer, really, to say, what is language development? What is all this about? Gestalt language processing, it's all good to hear about, but let's just talk about language development for a moment. So language development for all children, regardless of where they come from, is natural and achievable. It's flexible and it's self-generated. And, you might think that that's a pretty lofty statement to make, because how many of our kids really are having trouble with language development? Well, it's true. But the reason they're having trouble is not because of them, I hate to say it, but it's because of us. And I mean, present company accepted, you are attempting to fill in the gap for your child or the individual you care about. But we all have been really misguided, if you will. And a lot of the reason for that misguided way we have been has been just, I mean, I hate to say it, but our own faults. If we had listened to autistic people a long time ago, we wouldn't be in this position today, where we lost the wisdom of 40 years ago. And so if you want to know my one goal is that we not lose this wisdom again. And so we have a whole generation or two of autistic adults to thank for their word and for making us listen. Finally, we're paying attention. I think that was one of the big gaps in why this information wasn't more readily available. It's not just Ireland, I can tell you. It's not just the UK, I can tell you. It is in this country, as well. So whether a child is an analytic processor or a Gestalt language processor, if we understand which they are and who they are, then this language development is available to all children, neurotypical, neurodivergent. And guess what? This is the best part in some ways, is we don't have to drill, we don't have to prompt, we don't have to rely on rote learning, those canned things that people thought that they had to present to a Gestalt language processor because they weren't, succeeding. Well, the reason they weren't succeeding, and we'll talk about this in great depth, is because they were treated as an analytic language processor. And of course, those terms are probably new to you. So let's talk about those terms next. So there was once upon a time when we all, if we are SLTs or SLPs, and we went to school, we were taught that there was one way to develop language. And we called it typical. We called it normal. We gave it words that said, if you weren't that, you were deficient. It was a disorder if you couldn't develop language that way. Well, okay, so we know what that looks like, right? A single word, little one, little toddler, single words, word plus word combinations, little phrases, early sentences, complex sentences, and a complete grammar. So by 1983, and you'll see this in our next section, which is about the research, by 1983, this had been given a different name. And you might say, my goodness, where did that go in our annals of history? Well, part of the problem was that we don't read. I mean, SLPs, SLTs, and educators don't typically read linguistic, literature. And so these are the linguists who are leaders in this whole process. The linguists studied language acquisition in all kinds of kids during the 60s, during the 70s, during the 80s. And it was in 1983 that Ann Peters put it all together in a book called The Units of Language Acquisition. And what she said basically is, that analytic style, and she named it. That was in 1983. She named that style. And she said, that doesn't take into account all kids. Not at all. What about those kids whose first units of language are chunks, big chunks, often huge, enormous chunks? They can be little chunks too, but they're chunks and they're not single words. Now, a chunk could be short. It could be a single word length utterance. It could be wow or whoa. Those can be gestalts too. But the defining characteristic is that they're a chunk of sound, a chunk of language that actually is defined by the whole and defined by the intonation. So that's actually what we used to think of and still do in many circles you will run into. We called it echolalia. And of course, this from probably seeing things on social media. We used to think that it was absolutely pathological. And this from other areas. We thought we were supposed to extinguish it. We thought it wasn't meaningful, So a lot of unlearning has happened in this last, decade since my book came out. And we'll talk about where that fits in. And like Michelle said, how did that come to be? So anyway, back to this style of language development. And Ann Peters, like I said, described it exquisitely in her book, which, by the way, and we'll include some of these links later, is being read out loud on a podcast by Corinne's Moose, whose beautiful musical voice is way better than mine. And you will love listening to her read Ann Peters' book out loud. We'll give you the link as we get to our questions, etc. So then what happens? If you're a Gestalt language processor and you are developing the first units in chunks, then what do you do next? You can't put a chunk together with another chunk. That's the analytic style. And we'll pause there just for a moment to see how that fits together. So for an analytic language processor, that single word plus another single word creates the 2 units that kids move into next. But how about the Gestalt language processor? What does that child do with that chunk? Because it's an unanalyzed whole. They can't break it down. Can't break it down at stage 1. So that's what happens when they can get to the 2 unit stage, as Ann Peters would call it. And that is, we can have 2 things from that chunk. We can whittle it down and make it shorter, skim off the rest that we don't need and get down to the heart of what we want to say. Or we can not pick really, but we can recognize one part from this Gestalt and another part from this Gestalt and put them together. And that's what we call the mix and match combos. So stage 2 is absolutely awesome. It's so much fun. It's so much fun for a child. It's so much fun for the caregiver. It's so much fun for everybody because that child is being recognized all of a sudden as talking. And the thing is that at stage 1, most kids are just not even recognized as talking. We say, oh yeah, he sings, but he doesn't really talk. That's one way that we say it. Or we say, well, he's mumbling all the time. He's, babbling all the time, but I can't pick out any words. And so kids are often labeled nonverbal when we don't understand them, which, it's like the height of holistic practices to call another human being nonverbal. It's just the worst. So anyway, by stage 2, however, and we'll have a little video clip here so you can see the difference. But the thing that happens is people say, oh, he's talking now. It doesn't make any sense because it's all from Bluey or, Daniel Tiger or whatever, but at least he's talking, right? So we hear that a lot at stage 2. And so people in the extended family say, oh yeah, he sang Wheels on the Bus the other day. I don't know why, but he did. And at least he's, doing something language-wise. So that's one of the first lessons that we can help our extended families with, and that is singing is talking. We're not used to that. We're used to all this analytic stuff over there. And we thought that everybody kind of fit into this, little hierarchical bubble, if you will, this nice little neat ladder. Well, that's just the ALPs, as we call them, the analytic language processors. The GLPs, or the Gestalt language processors, are just different. They start with melody and the fullness of intonation and the fullness of experience. And, I'm sure that when Kelsey talked a little bit about the Gestalt cognitive experience, that many of you felt just right at home. And the same thing here. If we think about that experience, that episode, that whole phenomenon, that language is just a part of. So it's rich. I'm so glad that we're finally figuring this out the second time around. And I think you will feel like me that we cannot lose this wisdom again. Okay, stage 3. So as individuals move along in this process, then another mitigation happens. And mitigate is a strange word. It doesn't work in English. It doesn't work in American English. It doesn't work in other languages, but we're stuck with it. We can tell other people that mitigation is just changing it. That's all it is. And it doesn't work in many languages, I can tell you that. So think about other ways you can explain it, to your next door neighbor, because it's just changing that gestalt, modifying that gestalt in any way, shape, or form. And it gets down then at stage 3 to that second mitigation, which is down to single words. And we all kind of breathe a sigh of relief because we think, oh, finally, we've got building blocks that we can start to support an individual, a GLP, to putting one word plus another word, just like the ALPs. And that happens, and it's stage 3. And it's usually late. It's usually later than an ALP would be doing that. There are plenty of Gestalt language processors who can do this on their own. And I think that that's part of the reason that we have really no idea how many Gestalt language processors are out there, because some kids can do it on their own, flying under the radar, so to speak. And by the time we hear them talking, at age 4, we say, oh, he's a late talker. So I'm going to pause there for you to think about kids you've known and think about the various ways that Gestalt language processors present when you meet them at age 2, completely unintelligible, only singing songs, maybe not any melody you can pick out, but picking songs as their media of choice. If they're a little older, you might find one child who's actually at stage 2, and maybe they're somewhat intelligible. And you think, where did that come from? Let's go, he says. And you're thinking, was there a longer gestalt? Like, let's go to the store. Let's go get in the car. And he's been able to whittle it down to a place that he's intelligible. Let's go. Or maybe it doesn't sound that clear, but at least it's something that has an intonational frame to it. And you're so happy. Now, it's possible that you wouldn't recognize that an individual was a Gestalt language processor until they get to stage 3. And you hear this word, and it's like out of the blue, like, why would he be saying, video or, phone? Why would that be that word? And then you think, well, you know what? There might have been something way before that. Like, let's watch the videos. Where's your phone? Or things that you might have said within your family or school structure. But anyway, we're going to spend quite a bit of time on stage 3 as we move along. And then what happens is things just kind of morph. They morph from stage 3, which is those single words that we can refer to. And we often find that that's when kids point for the very first time or refer in some other way, like pen or green. And it just feels very, very different. It's like a pause in life that says, wait a minute, he used to say, I want the green one. Now he says, green. And there are people who would think, oh, it sounds like regression, but you will be so well informed that you'll be able to reassure that teacher at school that no, it's not. It's really just a second mitigation. It's called stage 3. So then, as I say, stage 4 just kind of morphs into being, where kids are then ready to say, green marker, pen, orange. And those 2-word phrases that when a child is an ALP and little, we think, yeah, of course. When a child is older and they're already 4 years old or 6 years old or 8 or 10 years old, we think, that sounds really odd. You used to be able to recite the entire, ABC song, or give me the entire script from, you know, a particular Bluey episode. And now he's going to say, pen, orange. Well, you will be among the educated ones, and you'll be able to say, yeah, I know, I know. And let me tell you, then that's going to expand into the rest of stage 4. And then we're going to have stage 5 and 6. And ultimately, we're going to have a complete grammar. And it happens. It happens naturally. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples. For the ALP side of this, you can look at a typical utterance that you might recognize. Ball. My ball. That mine ball there. Want to play soccer with me? We could invite my little brother to play. After we play, we could get ice cream. So it follows the stages of grammar development, just the way an ALP does, you know, fairly seamlessly, typically. And then you think, okay, what about this little guy here who was not referential? And this little one here, we told her ball. We said it, right? We provided that sound contour like Ann Peters talks about, and being an analytic processor, she repeats it. She says ball. Well, he doesn't, because what that represents to him is when he was at that game and it was so exciting, and you know, the announcer said, and it scores, and it scores. And so what he picks up is that whole scene and all that language, and the only part you could understand at all was, and he scores. Okay. So that Gestalt, and he scores, which really technically would be, you know, part of that whole sound stream, because he's got it all. He's got, because he's probably visualizing that entire game going on. You know, our kids are so smart. And, you know, one of the problems I've had all along the way is being able to keep up with kids cognitively. Because I believe it or not, I do not visualize at all. So I'm sort of, you know, limited to what I can hear and can say. And yeah, so, and he scores. And then stage 2, dividing it up, we scores. Then stage 3, score, ball, ball, score, ball, mine. Okay. It sounds so different, and probably for that individual, it feels incredibly different. Kick, ball, fun. Gots game, friend? Did you see that goalie stop the ball? If we win, I think we get to be in the playoffs. All right, so just a couple of slides for fun that just point out that gestalts happen in all languages. And now post-pandemic, we know that our kids are, you know, accessing a lot of these multilingual gestalts, or gestalts that come from other languages, and they all have the same legitimacy. You know, a lot of times people will say, well, should I limit, you know, the media to English? And we say, you know, given what we're looking at right now, you know, across the globe, kids are just developing language. And stage 1 could happen in one language, and then in a second language. Then a child can go back to those stage 1, you know, gestalts and mitigate them, mitigate the ones in the second language. There are lots and lots of ways that this happens, but our kids are absolutely amazing. And at this young age, you know, the collective wisdom we have so far is we do not want to limit that home language in any way. So many families think, oh, I must, you know, speak English, or I must, you know, make sure that my child is only having to deal with one language. And then we miss out on the authenticity of that home language. And, you know, our GLPs pick up on that. And so if we are presenting something in a very stilted manner, our kids are not finding that the soundtrack of memorable experiences like they would if we were authentically speaking from our home language. So lots to think about. I don't want to get into too much depth there, because this is something we can talk about, with our Q&A and go back to even next time. So the gestalts, regardless of the language, represent meaningful experiences. And you say, well, what if it's a media experience? Well, if it's a meaningful media experience, then that soundtrack, as Ann Peters said, is part of that whole. I'm going to pause there for a moment, because obviously we all have a lot of questions about screen time and when is it okay? When is it too much? When is it not enough? And so I think what we, as people who care about an individual who is developing language, what we can think about is, when is this sound stream going to be meaningful to a child? And how am I going to be aware of it enough that it becomes a shared experience? So rather than, quote, limiting screen time, I think the big admonition on us is to pay attention to it, know when it's really meaningful to a child, and to be there as much as possible, so we know which things become gestalts. And that's one thing we have to just define over and over again. The gestalt is in the mind of that child. We think, well, couldn't we just model some other language, Well, we can, if and when we have fully acknowledged the gestalts that a child already has in their head. So we can't ignore that stuff. We can't just turn it off and say, oh, we're not going to do that media anymore. Because if a child is really developing language with those types of meaningful experiences, how is that being perceived by the child? Probably like, oh, mommy thinks I'm bad. Grandma thinks that this is bad language. And it's the most resonant language that I have, as I've watched, whatever character, Paw Patrol, and, those guys are heroes, Grandma. Can't you just share that with me? This is my kid brain, there. So it's not like, unrestricted media is just like, oh yeah, of course. But, we are the adults in this situation, and in all those, linguistic environment situations. So we have to be obviously judicious. But on the other hand, if this is the language that a child resonates with the most, because that situation, that experience, even if it's experience with media, if that's the most important, then we have to realize that. And can we move to other more sensory motor activities? I mean, I'm hearing, Kelsey in my head thinking, well, couldn't we be, jumping and running and playing and, having all of these sensory motor experiences while we're watching? Yes. And have I learned a lot from Kelsey as well? And one of those things is, is there any reason our kids should not be moving? We can't think of any. And so, media also is something that, can travel, can go and be there when, a child is really well regulated, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of considerations here, of course. But in general, we are recognizing that media is potentially part of meaningful experiences. All right, so these are just the stages on one slide. I'll let you read that while I take a drink of water. And this is one you can share with others. You will have a PDF of as far as we get with our presentation today. So you can share some of these slides with other people. And this is one that just has it all on one page, so it's really pretty handy for sharing. Let me just pause right here, Michelle, and see if anybody has any questions that we should clear up right now.
We do have questions. I have taken photos of them so that I can relay them to you. So one is, my son is GLP just at level 3. He's so quiet now, and I feel like engaging or talking too much anymore. I'm not quite sure how that sentence was going, but so he used to sing morning till night nonstop, and now doesn't sing anymore. Should I be concerned?
No, that is so perfectly right on time and target. It's absolutely perfect. And the next thing, you probably are not going to hear those songs reemerge yet. And, you know, we talk about this conundrum, if you will, of what a child had access to when they were probably living in a whole experiential right brain place, and what they can experience when this brain shift probably shifts over to the left brain. And if I could ask, you know, neuroscience to do exactly the research that I would like, it would be, I'd love for people to look at that stage 3 corpus callosum, that connection between the hemispheres, and look at whether that brain shift is happening the way we see it happening. And your experience is just like mine, just exactly like what mine was every single time. And that is, life slows down. That child is in the present moment. Things are all of a sudden referential. There's not that musicality. It's just not accessible right now, because that shift, you know, as far as we can tell, that shift has occurred. Now, you know, the thing is, and you worry about this, I mean, people have called it regression, you know? I mean, historically, we've called it regression. So we know it's not now, but that doesn't make it any easier for you to say, what do I do? And so when we move a little farther along here and we get into stage 4, we're going to look at exactly what you can do to start to move into that left brain early grammar, which is before sentences. So it's not complicated. It's not a lot of words. It doesn't take a ton of accessing. But what it does is it morphs absolutely seamlessly and flawlessly. I tried to put those two words together. It didn't work. Anyway, absolutely seamlessly and flawlessly into grammar. But we'll cover that in just a moment.
Great.
Okay.
So there's another one, if you don't mind. I'll just
Sure.
go with one more here. This actually is an older child. He scans across different kind of programs and generates Gestalt, and they're kind of wondering how they can encourage him. So maybe he's using tropes from cartoons and whatever, and he's 16, and they're repeating the Gestalts back since they've learned about this, but they're wanting to see how they can shift him a little bit more towards something age appropriate, because he seems stuck at stage 4.
4?
Stage 4, yeah.
Really? Well, I'll tell you what, if this wonderful person asking this wonderful question would feel okay waiting until towards the end, I'd
Perfect.
love to come back with that, because stuck in stage 4 is an amazing place to be, honestly. Yeah, we can, let's talk about that.
Great stuff.
Okay, so let's talk about just some of the beginning points, and then we'll move into that wonderful question, because there are some things to do, certainly, but we also have to talk about a few things about older individuals, and that's part of the reason we've already, you know, planned a part 2 of this presentation, because there are a lot of considerations for older individuals that are not the same as for younger individuals. One of which is that not always can we look at more grammar development after the age of probably 17, 18, maybe even 20. It gets a little harder for older individuals. So I'd love to talk about that in great length when we move a little farther along, and we could talk about, if you have person asking that question, if between now and an hour from now, if you were able to jot down some of those stage 4 utterances, I'd love to just look at all of that. Thank you. That's wonderful. Okay, so let's go back to some of the beginning points, which are at stage 1. And what we can say at stage 1 is, kids are not intelligible. And this is really, for the most part, across the board. If a child is really young, their entire motoric system has just barely come online. And, not until they whittle their utterances down at stage 2 and make them just shorter and easier, they're not going to be intelligible to us. So we have to think about that. We have to think about where does that fit in our, support for them. Can we add more music? Can we go back to some of those things that we do understand? And can we spend some time with those utterances, in front of a mirror? And can we do some things with breath support and intonation and stopping and starting your voice when we're sliding? And I think about now what Kelsey would say here, and that is, if you are supporting from the bottom up, that is deep breath support, all those things that she would talk about in terms of effort and working against gravity and what that does and what that does to your core. And when you think about the core that we always talk about, for regulation and all kinds of things, that's also where, deep breathing lives. So we've got to have that diaphragm be able to descend. It's a muscle. And so we've got to have, sometimes when you've expelled all that air, like blowing with a straw, and you need some air, that's when you take that deep breath. And that is the foundation of speech. And especially for our GLPs, because they need that long intonational contour to be supported by exhalation. And so if a child is sedentary, or a child is trying to, say a low tone kind of child who is, working to support themselves in upright, are they going to be able to access that deep breathing? No. So we have to think about, where do some of those things that Kelsey is teaching us, where do they fit in? And where does that platform swing fit in? And where does writing, that is, upright, RIGHT, where does writing ourselves fit in? Where does that fit with a midline? Where does that fit with deep breathing? And then what about intelligibility? We thought the kids were supposed to be intelligible, with a consonant and a vowel sound. Well, no, not a GLP, right? Intonation might be the only part of their speech that is intelligible. The wheels on the bus. Let's redefine intelligibility as we look at these next videos. So this is a little girl, and you can read more about her on our website. We'll have lots of links to that at the end. But her mom has given blanket permission for her videos to be seen by audiences who are as respectful as you. I still blur this a little bit, so it's not quite as identifiable. But listen to her at stage 1 and see what you can pick up. So how much of her intelligibility was the song? Because you knew the song, and you probably, like everybody else, hears that song a lot. But also, what were her, play toys at the time. You knew it was about wheels and vehicles. And so intelligibility increases when we get all those other little clues. All right, now listen to the difference as she gets to stage 2.
Circle, Mommy.
Uh-huh.
Star.
Mm-hmm.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how the world is here are. Again. An English.
So big difference.
Star.
Star.
So that's just to point out that when your stage 1 child is unintelligible, that is absolutely the way it is for virtually all stage 1 little kids. So that doesn't mean that a child couldn't be dyspraxic, apraxia of speech. Of course, that could be a possibility, but balance that urge to jump into a diagnosis with the fact that stage 1 is just impossible. It's impossible for little articulators, to say. And also, the other thing is sometimes we're being told now that we ought to provide AAC, and it's not that we shouldn't sometimes, right? But we have to also balance what a child is capable of producing with speech and what they're not capable of producing with speech right now. And if we did use AAC at this point, would it be because we are there helping a child to mitigate? Or are we just, panicked because we don't know what the child wants? And we might jump to a single word accessing. And then we have that question in our mind. Well, is that stage 1? So, a lot to think about. We'll come back to this later. So then let's go back to some of the basic questions. How do we know what we know about language development in general, be it analytic or Gestalt? And why, as we talked about already, why are we rediscovering, recognizing the Gestalt style? And again, we would be, I think, truly, we would be nowhere without all the autistic adults who are informing us. I mean, we would not be here today, any of us, without you. So a huge debt of gratitude and deep respect. So let's look at the research. And as I alluded to, our field, that is speech language pathology, spent probably a good 20 plus years figuring out how language development happens for all kids. It wasn't just Gestalt language development that got discovered, and written about by Ann Peters, 1977 and 83, but it was really everything. We didn't have anything before that. So it was qualitative researchers, who had their recording devices, and they were, not like today where it's like, oh, what's going to be the procedure to get them to talk? No, I mean, this was like the foundation, like how do they develop language? So Ann Peters put all this together in the book I've already talked about, the 1983 book, which has been republished by our Communication Development Center, because I basically told Ann Peters that to find these bits and pieces, these old PDFs on the University of Hawaii website was, destined for not having a very large audience. So she just suggested giving us the copyright and that we republish it, as a PDF. So I'm incredibly internally grateful to her for that. And then Barry Prezant, and you may know his name. I'm sure you are aware of, Uniquely Human and the book and the podcast. But what he did, is way more extensive than 1982, 83. He has decades worth of, materials in articles and chapters in books, but really he extended the work of Ann Peters, looking at the analytic and the Gestalt style, and he extended it to say, if you are an autistic person, you probably are, you probably are developing language with what he called an extreme Gestalt style. And what he meant by that is that, some GLPs might not be really gifted Gestalt cognitive processors or thinkers, but autistic people are. And I don't mean to categorize anyone who doesn't feel like that includes them. But what Barry Present did is he followed his subjects around for a year and put together all kinds of information about that Gestalt language development style. Now, at the end of his 1983 article, he said, you know what? If anybody's paying attention, we need lots of longitudinal research here. Because, yeah, it was good to follow these kids, but we need lots and lots of qualitative research in the form, probably, I mean, it wouldn't have to have been this way, but clinical research, because where are we going to find a group of kids that we can follow? So my very first article about all of this was in 2005. Then the book came out in 2012. And then our article at the end of last year, kind of summarized a lot of this material. And we'll make sure you have access to that as well. Okay, so to go back to Ann Peters, there's the 1983 when she first published all of this, and then the 2021 when we republished it as a PDF. And this is the crux of essentially everything. To understand early language acquisition, one must understand the language units that children are actually working with. One of the central processes in all early language acquisition is the extraction of pieces or units from the speech stream in which the child is immersed. And then this is like, yeah, you can hardly argue with it. Since the child does not know the language, it is unreasonable to assume that the first units she or he extracts will coincide exactly with the words and morphemes or word parts of the system. So you think, well, of course, why would we have thought that words were the basic foundational units? That's crazy if the child doesn't understand. Recognizing that children may be extracting phrases as well as words as their first units can explain the wide range of variation in the size of those units if you were to measure them like in words or morphemes, like he's sliding. So you've got he plus the S of is, he's, slide, plus the ing of the morpheme to make it the correct grammar. He's sliding. Is that 4 units? No. Is that in the vernacular that SLTs would use, mean length of utterance? Is that 4? No. It's a chunk. It's 1. Peters and colleagues reported a wide range of gestalts in their neurotypical subjects and coined the term frames and slots to describe the combination. So what Barry Present has said, besides the fact that he felt that autistic individuals were the extreme of Gestalt, what he also has said is that ALPs, analytic processors, and GLPs, Gestalt processors, are on the same continuum. So if that's the case, then we have to look at where were Ann Peters' subjects, where were his subjects, where are the kids you care about? And just to make you not feel, at all, I guess, worried here, let me just say this. I don't really know if that's all true. I mean, is there anything that tells us that it really is a continuum? we've tended to use that, all the time when we talk about human behavior, like there's this central tendency. I don't think we know enough kids to say that yet, honestly. So I think that every bit of verifying, validating, acknowledging, recording, keeping track that you are doing will help us to get a bigger database, if you will, of more and more kids. Because, we've got two hemispheres. Is there any reason that there would be a central tendency? I'm just not so sure. So in terms of where are we going into the future, what do we need to think about? Let me just throw out one little hypothesis, because I think that people agonize over, well, is he really a Gestalt processor? Or is he an analytic processor? And so if he's a analytic processor, I don't want to inundate him with Gestalts. I don't think that's all bad. When we treated everybody as an ALP and thought single words were the big important thing, we left out a lot of kids. But I think the opposite is not true. If we were to treat all kids as contextual, meaning-based, and used Gestalt language development principles, I'm not so sure we'd leave anybody out. I just am not sure who's like a super analytic person. I asked this to groups of people, and not very many people, really raise their hand. They think, well, when I was a kid, I did some things analytically, maybe I named, some of the things that I really wanted for dinner. But then I said other things like, come on, hey guys, let's get out of here, etc. So I don't know, food for thought. So, but back to Barry Prezant and the things that he has taught us. And he says, language patterns such as immediate echolalia, which we haven't talked about yet, and delayed echolalia, which means later, can be better understood as manifestations of Gestalt processing. So that was his 1983 article. So let's talk about those two things for a moment, and then maybe we'll pause and take some questions before we get into our case examples. Okay, so then Barry Prezant added, growth and progress in the acquisition of a flexible and generative language system depends, to some extent, on the analysis and segmentation of Gestalt forms. Same thing that Ann Peters said. At the second 2-unit stage, kids have to break down those Gestalts. So let's do one more slide, and then we'll talk about some of those qualities. So then you know where I fit in. I really listened to Barry Prezant, and I listened to him because, I had just started a temporary 3-year position at the University of Wisconsin, a clinical position. And so we were seeing kids, and my very first autistic child was clearly using echolalia. And his mother described it to me, and she said, yeah, of course it's meaningful. Sure. He says, come on, guys, let's get out of here. And it sounds just like his big brother. So I came by all of this information very honestly. Someone else handed me a workshop handout that said, okay, here are the stages. And by then there were only 4, but it just was like magic. It just worked. And so my very first individual who I got to play with this stuff was Dylan. And the article in 2005 was written all about him. So if you want an article for other people to read and get just a feel for it, it's just all about this one child. And I think it goes into all the detail, really. So it's one that, people have liked, even though the language is antiquated, it hasn't been updated. I don't know how to take an old article, honestly, and make the language right for now. But, the caveat is, I didn't mean it in any way, other than the lingo of the day. Anyway, so that's when my research started. And after the 3 years at the university, I started a clinic. and it was very, physically supportive. So kids were coming in, autism diagnoses, other diagnoses that had to do with sensory processing, et cetera, et cetera. And we just documented everything and looked at the longitudinal progression that Barry Present said we needed to look at. And in the process, we realized that, grammar doesn't happen all at once, obviously. We knew that from earlier researchers with analytic processing. And so we kept track of everything and recognized that there were indeed 6 stages, that really emerged from the data that we had. So that's where I fit in. And so I realized that, I think in Ireland and the UK in general, that people are still saying, where's the research? Well, you can say, you know what, there's so much research, you guys. Let me just point it out to you and let everyone recognize that, good grief, we knew all this 40 years ago. And, we have the longitudinal research that verifies it all and quantifies it. And do we need to find a best practice that is different from what kids do naturally? No. And that's the value of the old qualitative research. It's based on what kids do naturally. So we have plenty of research. We've got plenty of things for other people to look at, though. Going into the future, we need to look at the bilingual kids. We need to look lots more at older individuals. We need to look at, like Kelsey would point out, we need to look at the role of regulation. There's many things yet to research, but the basics, no, we don't need to look at that yet again. Okay, let's look at time, and I'm seeing Michelle's face, and I wonder if she's thinking that we ought to take just a short little 5-minute break.
I think you should do whatever feels natural for you. I'm 100% happy to keep going. And yeah, if you want a 5-minute break, please take it.
Okay, thank you. Not yet, maybe. Maybe we'll do a few little videos, and then you'll have a feeling for a lot of this after these videos, and then we'll do the case example. So this is a little guy who is at stage 1, and you're going to hear something that will probably be recognizable. And then he kind of, in the way that kids do, morphs into stage 2. So take a listen.
How can you find what coming out? How can the sun fly further away? It's a train. It's paper. It's a network. It's a network. It's box. It's ball. And bus. And party. On building. Life. This is you.
So I hope you could hear that decently. Certainly you heard Itsy Bitsy Spider, I'm sure. And then when he goes into it's a, I have a feeling you've recognized that as stage 2. So in other words, stage 2 then is pretty flexible. And when kids are into stage 2, they can use that frame like Ann Peters talked about, and they can fill it with slots of words that are in their environment, just like he did. It's a Netflix, it's a paper. So you heard that morphing right there. Now, we are going to go into another stage 2 video right now, partly because we're going to follow one of these stage 2 utterances into stage 4. And so this is kind of, this will be background for the 16-year-old who one of you brought up just recently. But all of this foundation really helps to be able to figure out some of the things that are maybe a little bit different from, typical, if you will. So this video is blurred a little bit also, not because you can really tell who's whom, but I wanted to just keep this so when we have recordings out among your colleagues and other families that all of the videos are just not quite as crisp as they were in the beginning. So listen for how stage 2 sounds.
Oh, it's missing. It's missing the red cone. There it is. There it is, the red cone. Oh. Hey, it's missing the red cone. Get back here. Get back here. My orange cone. Where is missing? The orange cone.
Okay, so the utterance we're going to follow along the way here is that it's missing. And you can hear that telltale quality of the intonation that says, this is the thing, it's missing. And probably if I were better musically, I could take out my pitch pipe and I could say, yep, the frequencies, align and it's the exact same pitch. Anyway, so I think I've taught myself over time to recognize that. And I think every time I say, it's missing, it comes out exactly the same way. So we're going to jump to an older student for just a moment, just to get, again, that feel for stage 2 and how it sounds when an individual is young and when an individual is older. So this is the individual I wrote about in the book, and I called him Bevan at the time because I thought he might want to, keep his identity hidden, but he has since, announced he is Benjamin and I can use his name, and no, there's nothing that he's hiding. So anyway, this is how he sounded at stage 2. And I have a feeling that those of you who are affiliated with some older students will recognize this quality.
Oh, Jimmy Barry, what is that stuff? No. Look there. Wow, that's all. We're the black bears are really good time trees. But I mean, so watch this. This. It's freezing. Flying around. It's very now. Like us. Stuck in this.
Okay, so I cannot claim that I understood at the time very much of that, or that I understand very much of it now. But certainly the watch this was one of those mitigations, and his OT in the background heard that and decided to come and watch. Okay, we're going to move ever so gently from stage 2 into stage 3. We're going to pause and practice something at stage 3 before we move on to stage 4. And once we go through stage 4, we're going to actually take like just a quick 5-minute break, just to clear your heads. And then we'll come back and do the case example. And that will take us up to the end of this evening. And we'll take some questions and look towards our next time together. All right. So as you know, stage 3 is this second mitigation or breaking down when chunks at stage 2, it's missing, get broken down into single words. And none of you are, as old as me, but in our old textbooks, there was an example of this phenomenon of word plus word combining. And of course, it was meant for, analytic language processors. And it was the mommy sock stage. So I doubt that those are, examples that you'll see in your textbooks anymore. But the idea is that if you took the two referential words like mommy and sock, that you could put together, a virtually endless combination of communicative intentions. And so mommy, sock, and sock, mommy, green, foot. there, basket, basket, full, shoe, brown. And as we kind of read through this list, you start to think about, okay, so grammar is going to emerge from here. So this is like the, level playing field from which grammar emerges. And they're, in the vernacular, this is SLT lingo, but they're semantic or meaningful or vocabulary relationships. And that's stage 3. I think we'll do our little practice after you watch the case example. We won't do it quite yet. Okay, so stage 4. What happens at stage 4? Things just keep going. And so at stage 4, grammar starts, but it's really at this very beginning 2-word combination level. And when we come back for our second half of this presentation later, we'll talk about this at more length. Like, how do you figure out which word combinations to start with? And we'll see some links to our website, and you can read even before we do part 2 later. But those combinations are really the entire gamut of semantic relationships and how one word plus another word go together. And that's all grammar is, really. I think of it now, I used to think of it, in a much more complex way, but the truth is it's just connecting the dots of stage 3 words. That's it. So we've got stage 3 words: kitty, my, doggy, kitty, not, outside. So we're putting kitty plus doggy together with a little bit of grammar. We're putting kitty plus outside together with a little bit of grammar. Kitty, inside, adding a verb. Like, kitty, furry. So taking that stage 3 combo and adding a little bit of grammar. And because it is before sentences, we actually call it that. We call it, pre-sentence grammar. Just little phrases. And honestly, this stage 4, and this goes back to that 16-year-old, stage 4 is enormous. And what kids are able to do at stage 4 is just absolutely phenomenal. We're going to listen to a little video in a moment of a girl who's emerging into stage 4 and how savvy her mother is as her communication partner. So stage 4, all this grammar stuff, keeps on going. Now, the way this is coded, just to let you know, is we include a couple of things here. This hours with parentheses around it, that's called mazing or repetition, or there's all kinds of ways, reformulation, but it's all language, it's linguistic. The way it sounds, however, is it sounds actually like stuttering, but it's not. It's all linguistic. And there's a long history of mazing, and I can share that with whomever would like to have that shared with them. But there are actual norms, for ALPs, where if you take an analytic language processor at age 3 and then at age 7, each year, the amount of mazing or reformulations actually increases, which you wouldn't think that'd be true. You'd think, oh, kids are going to get more automatic and better at it. Well, to some extent, that's true. I mean, some parts become more automatic and fluent, and some parts are brand new. Again, stage 4 is huge, and we'll talk about this at some length. And in between this presentation and the next one, I can send you a bunch of handouts or links so you can look at what stage 4 includes and how much prep there is before stage 5. Anyway, this is how it sounds. Ours kitty, like doggy. Kitty, it's missing. Not go outside. So I kept the it's missing from the boy with the orange cones to illustrate what happens with some of the stuff that's left over from stage 2. It's missing that never got broken up at stage 2 or stage 3. So we've got these little mini chunks, still at stage 4. And, that's fine. It's just a lot. There's a lot that needs to get broken down from stage 2. I will tell you, the honest truth is that in our research early on, I didn't think of this as being a mini chunk. I thought of it as being leftover stage 2. And so in the old version of the book, which is actually there's only one version, but I've updated the scoring part several times. But in the original version of the book, we called this stage 2 plus a stage 4. So a child got half credit for 2 and half credit for 4, which is horribly misleading and actually inaccurate. Because it's not like the child is going back to stage 2. It's just that there's all kinds of chunks that are left over from stage 2 that still need to be broken up. So that's the mini chunk. So next utterance, I wanna, here's that maze. I wanna, so the child pulls out of it, gets it right. I wanna play you. You wanna too? So you think about the pronouns, right? I mean, we know that all those pronouns were, supposedly reversed, at stages 1 and 2, which we know those words just came from the original language models, right? You want some more milk? You want some more milk? Says the child in immediate echolalia. And then in delayed echolalia, has that as a chunk. You want some more milk? And then when that child breaks it down, you want fun? You want cookies? So we hear that pronoun that we think is a reversal and we think of it, oh no, that's a mark of Gestalt language development. Well, it's just the original stage 1, stage 2 Gestalt. That's all it is. Anyway, at stage 4, it gets all equaled out. And so a child is grappling with I and you at stage 4, which is the right time to grapple with it. You wanna too? Mommy got ours toys. I gonna throw, okay? Now, by the end of stage 4, things look really pretty darn nice. My kitty likes your doggy. Kitty, you not go outside now. I want to play with you first. And then even down here, the next to the last line, missing. So it gets broken up, but it still sounds a lot like the original, it's missing. Okay, let's listen to a girl at stage 4. And then we will do 2 more little videos after this, and then we'll have a 5-minute break. Okay, so this girl is just amazing, and her mom is equally amazing in the sense that when she got to stage 4, her mom recognized that all of this mazing was natural. And you look at her and you'll see these things that, we would call, like, as SLTs, we would call like secondary symptoms of stuttering. You see it all here because she's trying to figure it out. She's trying to find these words. We talk about language development, but finding that language at stage 4 is not easy. It's a big, big stage.
And then a lizard.
That is a lizard.
That looks funny.
That does look funny.
It's a bird.
It is a bird. That's so silly.
I cut it. It's a big cake.
It is a big cake. I love it.
I read
So you hear that, right?
that guy doing.
What was that guy doing? They were setting off fireworks.
What are you doing?
They're dancing.
We're doing.
She's conducting. They're singing.
We're doing.
So the other thing you hear in her is that she has kind of made everything a little bit cognitively easier. So instead of what are they doing that she started with, she's saying like, what doing? What are you doing? So all of this is, kind of a part of what is, a real challenge at stage 4.
Looks like those guys are dancing.
We're doing.
Oh, they're hitting a piñata.
We're doing.
She's drumming.
We're doing.
That's Princess Celestia.
We're doing.
I don't know what they're doing.
No, they're all friends.
They are all friends. They're hugging.
We're doing.
She's DJing. She's playing.
So I'm going to move on here to something that talks about stage 4 a little bit in depth. And when you get your PDF handout, you're going to see supports at each stage. And you're going to see, a way a goal statement could be structured. So, rather than have like a goal bank that some people would wish we would put together, if one were to use a template like this and say, we're going to make sure regulation is good. We're going to make sure it's a conversational setting. We're going to make sure it's a child's choice. We're going to make sure there's a knowledgeable partner, that is you. And we're going to make sure that the spontaneity of what the student does is absolute. No prompting, no Q&A, no, telling a child to say this or do that. And then we're going to have the specific of the goal statement as something that relates exactly to that child. So this template basically is one that you can follow through each of the stages, and then you can see the differences as you read this in your handout. Ultimately, you can read the differences among all the stages. Want to just do a quick stage 5 and then a quick stage 6, and then we'll break for just a couple minutes. Okay, so this little girl is the very same little girl you saw at stages 1 and 2, and you can read her entire story as a kind of mom blog on our website, and you can look at all the videos in between. So at stage 5, she's gotten her stage 4 grammar, but can she access all of this easily? No. And that's, again, the point between language development, when everything's at, her best, when she's well set up. But what about when she's not? Can she access everything she wants to readily? No. So her mom just waits and gives her the chance to say it again. So you're going to hear some fumbling around at the beginning. You're going to hear not so fancy grammar. Then you're going to hear a couple of things that are pretty fancy grammar. Like, I don't want to spoil it, so take a listen.
Can we play with that?
Can we play with what?
That!
The computer?
No, that!
What?
That!
Hold on. I
The
can't.
thinky thing!
The what?
The think thing.
Oh, yeah, we can play with the sink. Hold on. Should we do that instead of this?
No, what about what we were doing?
Huh?
What we were
Do you want me to put this away and then we'll get the sink out?
No. I want that to be filled up with water by that.
Okay. So,
And pour it in the thing.
okay. So you would like me to fill the sink toy?
Get a thing.
Okay.
Pop it,
So before we do that,
pop it, ball.
let's put all of these back. Uh-oh. What's gonna happen if we do that?
I don't know. I don't know.
We might,
I don't know.
we might lose those. So
There's Blue.
here you are, Blue. Good thing we didn't lose you.
No. Where are they?
There they are.
I'm saying, where are they?
Okay, how many should
I see 3.
Okay, how many should we have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5, and we're supposed to have 6.
Oh
But
man.
we're missing red.
So you can hear when that better grammar, that more advanced grammar kicks in. Now, it didn't happen right away. And that's the thing we have to always, keep in mind is that for our GLPs, this grammar is happening later, So there are advantages and disadvantages, I will say. So the disadvantage of being an older individual and figuring out grammar for the first time is that, life is more complex. And you think about what it's like if you were, 2 years old figuring out this grammar or 3 years old figuring out this grammar. You don't have like a ton of experiences to put into a grammatical frame, if you will. But, when you're like in her case, she's not that old, but she's, pushing 5. And there's more. There's just more to put together. When you think about, even older individuals, there's a lot. There's a lot of language in that head. There's a ton of experience in that individual's head. And so like finding the grammar to put it together, it's a big deal. But on the other hand, when individuals are older, they've got a better sense of the meta, that overarching metacognition, like thinking and thinking about language, and they can plan better. So there are certainly trade-offs here. We're going to look at stage 5 really quickly, then break for 5 minutes. And the stage 5 supports are very similar to the stage 4 supports, but, we have to always remember that for Gestalt language processors, it's all about the meaning. So we can't get into, the thing we'd love to do, like, aren't we going to drill grammar? Aren't we going to take some sentence patterns and just drill them? No, can't do that. We probably shouldn't even be doing it with analytic language processors, but for a GLP, it's all about the meaning. So the advantage to that is that if you are in a situation like, let's just take, Cece back here, and she's trying to say, I want that to be filled by that. I mean, that's pretty sophisticated grammar. And so had she, been unable to find that, her mother could have said, she kept the conversation going. Her mother did the only thing that was necessary to give Cece another turn. And Cece figured it out because it's all natural. That's the thing. It is natural. And grammar builds on itself. So, but let's say she had not. Her mother could have said, oh, you want water from that sink to go into that sink? Or she could have said, oh, so you want me to pour the water from there into there? There's different ways she could have used, a more complex sentence. But as it turned out, her mom knew her very, very well. She knew that her girl would be able to come up with that. And that's a pretty fancy one, to be filled, a passive voice. And she could have more, at a lower grammar level, she could have said, I want that water to go in there. There are different ways she could have said that, but her mom was amazing. Okay, so let's now take a look at this little girl at stage 6. And this is all before she goes to kindergarten. So listen to this. I'm going to call it fluency, which is probably not the best word because, halting language is not disfluent. We just don't have a really good word for it. But she can access it very somewhat automatically. You'll see a few repetitions in here where it's not so automatic, but anyway, that's kind of the way it is.
And Lincoln.
All right, and what were you going to tell them?
I was going to tell them. I'm going to tell them that they don't know this.
Oh, okay.
Layla, you do not know this, so I'm going to come to your house, bring this to your house, and show what it looks like. And then I want you to say, "Whoa!" And it's so pretty, and it's so cool.
Okay,
My
show her
mom
how.
got it from Target, and I'm going to show you how it works.
Good, cool.
First, you put it on, and then do this.
Ooh,
And it lights up and glows in the dark. Yes.
how cool.
Watch.
Sorry, Marge.
Marge is on muted yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Gesturing wildly. So this mom did have SLT support. And nonetheless, she did most of everything, at home without a lot of support. But I'm just thinking about you, and I'm thinking if you're not going to have an SLT who can work with you, one thing you could do is form, a study group yourself and have it a place that you can share language samples and talk about stages. And I know Michelle would undoubtedly include Julie and me and other people as folks who could help with some of that. And I would be absolutely delighted. So rather than the 5-minute break, you probably tell I left and got my own water. And so let's go ahead and just do this case example. And then we will pause for discussion and questions. So stage 6 supports and goals, you'll have all this in your handout. So let's just move on to Chloe. All right, so dear Chloe was, misidentified as an ALP, because essentially all our kids have been misidentified as ALPs. And she was in a great school. She had great, SLP. She had a great teacher. She had a great OT, but she had not made progress for a year. And her mom, who happens to be a grade 2 teacher, recognized that there was something wrong there. And so she started looking at, what might be going on. And this was a good number of years ago. I'm thinking maybe 7-8 years ago now. And she Googled, autism and language development, and she came up with natural language acquisition. She bought the book. She got started herself before we ever saw this girl, because she's actually local to us. But, by the time, we were able to see her from our waiting list, 3 months had gone by, and she made great progress during that 3 months. So the one thing that I loved that her mother did is she documented what it was like before Chloe was acknowledged as a Gestalt language processor. So this is the before video, 3 months before we ever even met her.
Food for him? Big cow. Baby cow. No, don't give him the paper. Yucky. What do cows eat? Yeah, the cows go in that. They go in the calf pen. You have a picture of the calf pen on your paper. You're right. Yeah. Or sometimes they come in here. Yeah. Gentle, the cow. Gentle. Like we cut booty gently. Yeah, we can go see the cows over there.
So you can hear in Chloe all of the haltingness of trying to be an ALP and put together word plus word. You don't get to hear any of that musicality that we associate with Gestalt language processors. But by the time we saw her and her parents had done all these things, we could hear that musicality and we could hear what a true Gestalt sounded like. Then, as you listen to this, think about where did these Gestalts come from?
Is yours clear to you? I like him. Do you want to play camper trucks too?
Excuse me, Scooty.
Here, Mike. You can sit over here.
Hey,
Okay, so I'll give you a hint only because I don't want you to have to stay past our appointed hour. But you can hear, if you knew this girl, you could hear her mom and her teacher. I can get it. You know, and we're sometimes fooled by the gestalts of some kids because they don't come from media and they don't sound like, you know, we would expect a gestalt to sound. They sound great, right? They sound just like mom. But that's the point is, yeah, they are exactly like mom. I can get it. Excuse me. So we see why our kids are so misunderstood. And then you hear the other ones that sound like, hey, hey, don't, you know, clearly from little brother. So then what Chloe did next is she started to break down her gestalts. And the quality that we can hear acoustically is that it sounds broken up. So it, wake up. Instead of, it's gonna wake up, she says, it, wake up. And then I, hair, instead of, I'm combing your hair, or something that would be a whole gestalt. I got you, music. This work, instead of, this has gotta work. You know, so you can see again how confusing it can be to people. It's like, oh, I understand it, but it's not, you know, what is this? And if you knew a child at stage 1, then you think, where did that go? All that perfectness. Okay, like, I'm coming. Okay, again, it sounds perfect. But for Chloe, we know if it sounds just like mom, you know, it probably is. Get down. And if it sounds like Mikey, yeah, it probably is. One more turn, says Mikey, right? Through the voice of Chloe, the delayed echolalia. Don't up. If it's not perfect, it's probably mitigated. This was, again, and then there's a stage 3 word, single word, pushing. So this is a video you get to listen to, and this is what you'll hear. Marge says, Marge is running the camera. She says, your turn, Jessie. Chloe says, I work. You know, you can hear that quality of broken up stage 2. It work. And Jessie, her communication partner, says, it works. It works here. So just like that little one's mother who kept the conversation going, that's what Jessie's doing. Just keeping it going, giving Chloe a chance for another turn and another turn and another turn. Chloe says, block. And Marge is thinking, what? A stage 3 comment is happening right before our eyes and I get to capture it on video? I can't believe it. So Marge says, keeping the conversation going, she says, block there. Jessie says, block here. And then Chloe says, this piece get. It's like, huh? You know, where's the musicality? Where's mom? Where's little brother? This piece get. So stage 3 is unbelievable when you get to witness it for the first time. And we're going to practice this before we leave here tonight. Jessie says, put here, just keeping this Lego activity going. 3 would, says Chloe, again with that telltale difference that says, this is not a Gestalt anymore. You know, what's going on here? 3 fence, says Marge. Big fence, says Jessie. Wood, it's wood, says Marge. Put over here. And then Chloe kind of goes back to the basics, which if you're a GLP, it's back to the Gestalt. And she says, with all of the mom confidence that the Gestalt had in originally, I can help you. So as we listen, I want you to try to ignore Mikey in the background, which is impossible, and see if you can focus on Chloe's comments.
Right there. Your turn, Jessie. You make one.
It worked.
It worked. It worked here.
I'm gonna still build a tower.
Block there.
Block here.
Build a little house for the dinosaur.
This piece get.
Put here.
3 wood. Three fence.
Big fence.
Wood. It's wood. Tall fence.
Over here.
All right, let's actually pause and try this out right now before we go on to Chloe's stage 4 and stage 5. So with yourself and anybody who happens to be with you, if there is anyone, look at your immediate environment. Think about stage 3. Think about 3 wood or big fence. Think about things that you can refer to directly in your environment. Don't get into big grammar. You know, we don't want to, start talking about verbs and things like that, but really, truly things you can reference with your eyes or your hand or your pointing, and do orange, green. And then this is not a phrase. And that's part of the big point here, is it's not like an orange, green, orange. It's not like a green, orange either. This is just word plus word. So let's pause for truly 30 seconds and try this out yourself. And then for the next 30 seconds, could you write something in the chat to describe how that felt to you? It might have felt just strange and weird and uncomfortable, but you might have also felt a little bit of like peacefulness or relevancy or simplicity. But just be honest. But I'm very curious what you felt. Okay, I'm going to read some of these out loud because you guys are amazing. Okay, in the moment, focused, present, strange but focused, present, mindful, focused, freeing, oh, wow, present, no pressure, simple. My mind was less busy. Great comment. Focused. Had to focus. Yeah, I know that one. The simpler, the better. Sometimes I forget this level of support is enough. Good point. Calm, connected. Oh, wow. That is fantastic. I would honestly love if before we close tonight, if everybody could add just their comment in that chat. And then Michelle, if we could keep that chat forever and disseminate it somehow, that would be awesome. Can we pause for just a few more seconds and see if more people can add, and then we'll finish up Chloe's story. Now, calm is a really good word. Even just reading your word calm makes me calm. Wow. Now, there's a lot of busyness with so much. Aw, full of love for my boy. Wow. Okay, well, just to finish up Chloe's story, stage 3 sometimes lasts, I mean, I hate to say it, but like overnight. There are kids who go through this and by the next day they're moving into stage 4. So it's not something that we can control. I used to think that it was always a good idea to spend extra time here, just partly because of the kids in our clinic, but they are not necessarily representative of everyone. And, for younger kids, sometimes it can go very rapidly. For older individuals like Benjamin, he was there for a couple of months and he loved it. He loved it all. And it really helped him, and kind of the words you all are saying in the chat, it helped him to ground and feel free and feel calm. Because that was a pretty busy world he was living in. His gestalts were whole movies, truly. whole movies. He had hundreds of whole movies in his head. And so as you'll see in a little clip of him next time, you know, for him to be able to share and come out of that need in a way to go through the whole movie was really freeing. So Chloe, it happened pretty seamlessly for her being a young child. And she says at stage 4, as she's moving on, this is a swimming pool. And I'm thinking, wow, not just it's a swimming pool, which could have been, you know, a stage 2 type of comment. No, she had it separated out. This is swimming pool. And then she says, all the way there is a swimming pool. And I'm thinking, okay, all the way. Is that a little mini chunk? Yeah. Are we going to, you know, parse that apart, you know, right now in real time? I didn't know. So I said, all the way over there is a swimming pool? And she says, no, the all the way XX, I'm not sure, there. Then she says, the water coming all the way here. I'm thinking, you brilliant girl, you've got that all figured out. And then Jessie says, oh, the water's coming here. And then Chloe says again with self-generated grammar, dripping here. Jessie says, it's dripping. All right, so the middle screen here is blurred because this is a little video clip her mother sent. They moved, you know, can you imagine having the audacity to move away? Anyway, so we've got to see her for almost a year. Then they moved away and her mom sent the stage 5 video that you're going to hear right here. This is humongous character because I take a while to make this perfectly. So you can hear the amazing and the mini chunks at stage 5, even though her stage 4 was pretty darn fluent. Yeah? Do you want to see another one? She says. Sure, says her mom. We just have to, let's go over here.
This is Among Us character. Because it takes a while to make this perfectly.
Yeah.
Do you want to see another one?
Sure.
We just have to let's go over here.
Okay, well, let us pause right there and you can kind of debrief and reflect if there are some thoughts, and you can certainly keep them going in the chat. I'd love to read all of your comments. And then we'll talk about next time, we'll talk about older students. We'll talk about AAC. We'll talk more in depth about other kinds of supports. We'll get into scoring, and we'll just keep going. This is a wonderful venue, and I'm just so happy you're here.
That's fantastic, Marge. We're really excited about this also, and really glad that you're happy to come back because, yeah, it's a wide topic.
It is that. So thanks for all the chat. I can't wait to read it all. And yeah, you guys are so interactive. It's really, really very encouraging to me.
So we are coming up to the end of the second hour, and I'm conscious of you being here for this long with us, which again is fantastic. We have quite a few questions, and I'm trying to figure out kind of what to do about that because I don't perceive that you're available for another hour.
Well, how about how can we just pare it down to, you know, clumping them together somewhat and talking for another 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some themes maybe, and you can, and don't feel obligated to stay for another 20 minutes. And I'm sure other people probably need to go also, but just
I'm happy to.
Okay,
Sorry.
well, that's great. Yeah. Some themes that are coming up is there's concern about people moving on to the next stage. I think sometimes parents are, at least my perception of the questions is parents are fearful that maybe a child is stuck at a certain phase, and how do I get them, you know, to move from 3 to 4? Is there a concern about that? Should we just kind of approach that with the perspective of allowing things to be as they are for a while and not worry too much about what's next?
We absolutely cannot worry. You are completely, yeah, that's well said. And this is all child-led. And if we were to get down to what do we mean really when we say child-led, what we really mean is the child is the one who has language in their heads before we ever decided that we would partner with them on language development. They already had it. So the one thing we can kind of free our brains from is that there need to be all of these pre-verbal, kind of precursors, and that we need to have, joint attention, or we need to have whatever we might think. And that's the difference. We cannot lead. I mean, we just absolutely cannot. The child is there before we ever, recognize that they were a GLP. So that means that a child takes their own pace to move into the next stage. We do lots of language sampling to document where they are. And chapter 19 of the natural language acquisition book has been, revised a good number of times. So we could call it the scoring guide. So we'll add all these things to your links. So you can, if you're a parent and you're thinking, I'm not going to get an SLT to do a language sample with me, I really just need to do this myself. Then, this chapter 19 of the book, you don't have to buy the actual book to have chapter 19. You're going to read it and you're going to say, oh, okay, so we just talk, right? And then I record this child. Yes, exactly that. And so if you are recording every single thing your child says, then you are gathering a language sample. So let's look at this now. This is a later slide, but let's look at it right here. So if you're an SLP or an SLT, obviously you're going to record the student's language. Most of you in this group now are going to be parents who are not going to necessarily have an SLT to confer with. So you're going to be doing a lot of this yourself. So when you gather a language sample, and this is all in the scoring guide, you're going to not ask questions. That would be called soliciting a response, and it's not natural language. So there are a lot of things here that we have to sort of unlearn when we think, okay, how is this going to be, well assured that the child is being spontaneous? So that's the first thing. And it's going to take some practice, right? You're going to have to practice yourself, not asking questions, right? What's that? You probably have a child who knows what the prompt is and can answer that question, but that isn't language development. When you get that one word response, that doesn't tell you anything about their natural language. So record them first. I mean, just record. So pick a time when they're just outside playing, or they're with, a sibling or a neighbor, and you can hear them laughing and giggling outside. So record them. And then you get kind of used to this idea, like, oh, that's what spontaneous actually means. So if a child is spontaneous, then let's stick with this list, because this hasn't been kind of tailored for you, and I'll work on that to make sure that this is tailored for you. But you're going to record that child. This is what Mary Claire did, the mom of Chloe, is she recorded her child, and she heard, this laborious kind of word plus word attempts, but she also heard other stuff. When she started recording, she could hear, something that sounded just like Mikey had said moments before. So she thinks, oh, that's what a real Gestalt sounds like. So the next step is to transcribe it. And what that means is you take the best of what you've got. You've got an hour's worth of time outside, and everybody's playing and yelling and screaming, and you have this little part that you think, oh, okay, that's really what this child is saying when they're really being themselves. And it might sound like, I mean, I'll just make this up, but you'll be able to fill in the gap here because you know exactly how it sounds for your child. Like, and then you think, oh man, that's really like a big intonational contour. What am I going to write down? And I'd write it down just like that. They're like, oh, and then the other child says, what? You're coming up here too? And your target child says, you know, and so you're hearing some intonation that sounds like, oh, okay. Like racy to the top? Could it be? You know, and you don't have to decide and speculate, but you know, sometimes siblings are the best, have the best ears, right? For their siblings' language. So then, you know, older brother says, no, you can't come up here now. I'm up here now, one at a time. And so your target child says, oh man, you know, and you think, oh, I understood that. That would sound like, you know, how he would sound if somebody was keeping him from going to the top. You know, oh man. And so you write it down and you think, wow, that's really like language, right? And so then Big Brother says, okay, okay, if you really want to. And then your GLP says, like I'm coming, like don't leave without me. Come on, come on. I tried so hard to get to the top. Anyway, so I'm making all this up, obviously. But you know, when we talk about spontaneity, sometimes we're saying, if let's just say we were in a school. If we were in a school, you might say, the SLT might say, you know what? I don't get to hear spontaneous vocalization unless this child is in Phi Ed or out on the playground or at the OT session or in the sensory room. And it's probably going to be the same at home. So like, you know, you might want to get your child to do things, but it's not going to work. You know, if you sat down with your child and said, what color is that? You know, the child might say, I don't know. Maybe they'd say, yeah, yellow, maybe, but it doesn't work to get our kids to talk. It just does not work. So transcribe it as best you can. And when you can't, then go to Michelle and say, are we going to do this study group yet? Have we set this up? And who do we have here to help with some of this sampling and scoring? Because it's a bunch, but it can be done. And I think now's the time to really just get started. Then there's going to be that background information. This slide was meant for an SLP, but you know the background information, you as parent, you know, like, we had this one person who tried to, you know, say, what's that? You know, so you're going to pull that together and you're going to say, so maybe naming colors isn't really what I would call spontaneous language. But when, you know, granddad comes to visit and he's jostling the kids and throwing them in the air, and you know, my child says, wait, you know, you're thinking, wait is potentially a gestalt. Might have been mitigated. It might have been, wait for me, come on. You know, it might have been something longer. But what you're hearing is, wait, and you write it down. And you think, okay, that's spontaneous language. It took grandpa chasing him down the hall to get it and to hear it, but that is spontaneous language. So then look at chapter 19, and it's not written just for a professional. It's very easy reading, but the scoring itself gets dicey and tricky. So, but take a look at it and give it a try and think, okay, wait. No, that's how Big Brother says it. Wait. And so you write it down and you say, okay, that's stage one. That's a gestalt. And then the next thing happens, and Big Brother is chasing back the other direction, and Grandpa says, "You halt right there." And your target child says, "Oh, you better halt," or "You halt," or like, "Yeah, he's protecting me from this, bulldozer coming down the hallway." And so, but you get the idea. So this is like real life. This is truly, truly real life. And are SLTs going to be any better at this than you? Probably not, because they haven't had enough time to really work with this stuff and really get very good at it. And that's why I so appreciate your group and, this invitation and the ways that you can get started.
Great. Thank you for that. There's another one here about emotional regulation. There's a particular child working with an SLT, and their mother finds that the child struggles with emotional regulation. Is very difficult for her because she's not sure how to support him. So this SLT is saying he's not particularly drawn to movies or music or cartoons or TV at all. So she's trying to figure out how to help to provide some gestalts that he's able to kind of grab onto around emotions.
Well, let's just jump forward in the things that we're not fully covering today. But, here's the general kind of way of looking at this, is that once we acknowledge whatever gestalts a child has either said, accessed, played with media, or otherwise referred to, then we're in a position of actually modeling some new language. And what, you, writer of this particular question, has tapped into is that emotions matter and feelings matter. And those are often the memorable, quote, teachable moments. So what is language that might resonate? Now, these are just templates. We've gotten, I don't think any of you have gotten so inundated with social media that you've picked up on, oh, we got to do this, 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 and this. But, you may notice that as you start to branch out with social media a little bit, and people are kind of saying, oh, you should do this, you should do, let's go, let's play, let's have some fun. I'm ready, I'm coming, I'm hungry, and maybe a couple of others. And, those are nice. They're nice templates. And we do all tend towards them because honestly, they did come out of our research as well. Like, what do kids really say? And we want to pay attention to that. But like this person asking the question is saying, no, the typical stuff doesn't seem to really resonate. So maybe we've got to have more built-in, like physical support and resistance. And so then that's a good place to even start. Like, if you're going to be looking at a child who, maybe those media things just don't work. Maybe swimming is the medium. Maybe some of those, really like Kelsey would point out to us, some of those really deeply, regulating activities. And so then the difference between, it's so fun, it's terrible, kind of become the contrast that the situation might call for language contrasts. Could I play something, as long as we're sticking around a little bit? I'm going to play something for you that is an individual who had lost all his gestalts. I mean, he was in a completely ABA clinic, and his parents said for 5 years he'd basically given up talking. He knew that from an ABA perspective, if he revealed what he cared about, it would be taken away from him, and then he'd be made to work for it. So he didn't trust anybody. And so what this lovely clinician, and her name is Nellie, what Nellie was doing was giving him the assurance that she was really going to be on his side. So just watch the cute little expression as he looks up like, for real? We get to play with trains again? Which his family said he wouldn't reveal that to anybody anymore because they got taken away.
Are you Bubba?
Are you Bubba? Are you ready, kids?
Are you Bubba?
Are you Bubba?
So you saw that little almost like smirk on his face, like, wow, I get to be myself again. So now, a few years later, this was how things looked. Nellie was the primary clinician, her CF or her clinical fellowship year person who was studying with her was Milena. Milena stayed in that job and Nellie went back to her home location. But this is 2.5 years later. Just listen.
An exciting new
Activity books.
look for these.
Forever.
Thomas and Friends,
Adventures
wherever books are,
sold.
and hop on board.
For train.
Loads of
Fun.
do it again.
Fun.
Never ends.
A big assignment.
Thomas and Friends,
Books.
join Thomas
Percy.
and all the useful
Legends.
in
Giant border of books.
fun-filled
Storybook.
and exciting new activity.
So the only reason I wanted to play that right now, just in terms of this individual who you care so much about, and you're trying to find what are the things that resonate, and so it does take, every freedom known to a child in lots of ways to find those places where language makes sense to that child. And so we can't make that decision for anyone else, obviously. And it just is up to us to, follow. So I'd love to hear more about that individual. And I think the other point in this particular video is, with older students, sometimes we're not going to get to stage 4. Sometimes grammar is not going to be a viable goal. This young person is now 18. His family is so happy he's not prompt dependent anymore, and they love his stage 2 language. So we'll talk about that more when we come back the next time. But yeah,
Great.
So much, regardless of how far along an individual gets, let us say.
Yeah, so there's still a few more, but I'm just going to finish with this one because I think we've been here for a good long time. But so the screen time question is always a big question. So, and yeah, I think that we all have it in our heads because the media just barrels it into us that there should be restrictions on screen time. And one of the researchers that I follow says that most of that research is done on neurotypical kids. So what would you suggest to parents that have autistic children or children that are Gestalt processors? Is there a parameter around that, or are we kind of, again, doing the allowing thing for as much as we possibly can before we decide to try to shift focus?
Well, I think this video really illustrates that, and that is, if it's your meaningful Gestalt, you being the individual who's deriving it from media, and that Gestalt is really where you live, then who are we to decide that we have a better idea? And that's kind of a tough one because, we worry, obviously, we worry about something being, quote, functional language. We worry about whether it's mitigable. We worry about other people. We worry about, is this individual getting enough, physical movement so that they're not, almost like, probably Kelsey would say this, like, are they becoming visually stuck in a place that doesn't allow them to use their shoulders and, weight bear and climb and do all these things. So there's many real legitimate concerns. But I'm going to leave you with this one, because this is where an individual let her two well-meaning SLPs know that she didn't need their device, their potential gestalt. She had her own on her media, and this is where she lived, wanted to be, could use it well, and her SLTs paid attention.
Look at Miss Melina.
Let's get
Let's get
some
some more. That is so funny.
That is so funny. That is so funny.
Oh, let's get some more. Let's. Keep trying. Works for you. Oh, keep trying. Keep trying. Woo!
So she makes it very clear that she's got her own language, ladies, and that's the language that resonates with me. And yeah, I'll take your suggestions. Of course I will. But no, I've got lots of ideas. And if you work with me, you have the chance that I might work with you. So I think it's that kind of thing that we always are facing as adults. It's that partnership. And if we realize that the child is leading, and yep, we are the partners. Anyway, that doesn't answer everything. Obviously, it's a huge, huge, huge topic, but that's kind of one way to relax into, yeah, gestalts can come from anywhere.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. And so what I'm thinking is that you have a PDF for us, and maybe what I will do is hold this recording, because what I do after the webinars is I send out the recording link to everyone that signed up. So there's about 300 people that didn't make the actual meeting. So maybe if you could send that over to me, then I'll send the PDF and the recording at the same time to everybody that is interested. And then we will upload it onto our library as soon as we kind of make those links with our tech guys. And then you and I will book something next.
Sounds great. Thank you all so much. Thanks for being here, staying late, and caring so deeply.
Thank you for caring so much and for being so willing. Like, it's amazing that, that your generosity is overwhelming. So thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night.